Good morning, everybody. The years right after World War II were tense in our country because of the Red Scare, the fear of communists. And one of the players in that time period was Alger Hiss, who had worked for the State Department and was accused of being a spy for the Russians. And it was on this date, November 27 in 1954, that he was released from prison after spending over 3 years there for perjury. In 1917, when Lenin and the Bolsheviks took over Russia, communism moved from being just a theory to what was perceived as an existential threat to the United States. And in 1919 and 1920, a lot of foreign-born radicals were arrested and deported. These are known as the Palmer raids. So lots of fear of communism. So during World War II, the Army Signals Intelligence Service started spying on friends and enemies. Our allies included the Russians, and a lot of that kind of thing became important in the Cold War search for spies. 1946, Winston Churchill coined the phrase, "Iron Curtain has fallen over Europe." So this became the great metaphor of the Cold War, difference between communism and non-communism. In 1946, the House Un-American Activities Committee, a permanent committee in Congress, started looking into what it considered to be threats to the country, and it was criticized for having way too much power, for trampling on due process, but the political tenor was such that President Truman instituted a loyalty oath for government employees. So were you loyal to the United States became a big question. And these men, known as the Hollywood 10, refused to comply with that and were jailed, some of them, and blacklisted from working in Hollywood for years to come. So Elizabeth Bentley was an actual spy for the Russians, and she gave information to the FBI that eventually came public. So lots of fear of espionage by Russian agents in our country. So here's Whittaker Chambers. He was a writer, a bit of an intellectual, came from kind of a troubled family, and early on he read this book by Lenin, The Soviets at Work, and this was like a religious epiphany for him, and he became very interested in the Lenin version of communism, and in the 1920s joined the Communist Party of the United States, which was legal, also known as the Workers' Party. And he became very active in the Communist Party and actually edited the national newspaper called the Daily Worker, and also worked on other communist publications, and started to be a courier for Soviet intelligence in Washington during the New Deal. A lot of the New Dealers were sympathetic to socialism. Some were agents of the communists. But when Stalin started executing his own people during the Great Purge, Whittaker Chambers got cold feet. He ended up leaving the party, had to go into hiding. At least he felt he had to go into hiding because of what was going on in Russia. So this is Alger Hiss. He was a bright guy. He had worked in the State Department. He knew a lot of the movers and shakers during the New Deal. In fact, he was at Yalta when FDR went there in 1945 to meet with Stalin and Churchill. He wrote position papers and so on. But he was named as a communist agent by Whittaker Chambers to the House Committee, and a young member on that committee was Richard Nixon. And this kind of vaulted Nixon into fame. Hiss ended up going to prison for perjury, and on this date, November 27, he got out of prison. But other things happened to really shake the confidence of the American people. 1949, the Russians exploded a bomb because of espionage of our Manhattan Project. A couple months later, Mao Zedong and the communists took over China. They won the Civil War there. So this big thing happened in Washington, who lost China, and so on and so forth. And this is the context for Joe McCarthy, who in 1950 claimed he had evidence of communists in the State Department. The McCarthy era was about to begin.